everybody, and welcome back to Freezing Fire Part 2. So I was thinking of how we can make this simulation better. In the earlier tutorial you may have already seen the part 1 where the fire completely freezes over and the fire goes out. Well, I think we can make that a little bit better by changing how the smoke reacts over time and the color of the smoke, and also how the ice reacts over time. Should it break apart? Should it move? Should it fall over? We'll see. So let's play around and see what we got. So I think the first thing we want to do, or the first thing I would do because I think it's the easiest thing right now, is to just play with this fire over time. I want to go to my material palette and go to the flames. I'm going to go to my render view. Okay, so this is what our fire looks like right now, and because it's really hot and it's really controlled, we've got our smoke is just solid black. So I think because our ice is freezing, we should have a more cooler smoke over time. So I want to go to my smoke color and probably animate that over time as well, and make the animate the smoke brightness and the density scale, so it looks somewhat better. I'm going to go double check when our ice kicks in. I'm going to go to my OBJ. Where does our ice kick in? So our ice kicks in around frame 65. So I'm going to go to our material palette and just maybe around frame 62, put keyframes and all of that. And because I'm going to re-extend my timeline to 120, I'm going to make sure at the end here when it's completely frozen over around we'll say 88. The smoke color is somewhat like very sparse kind of white color like that. Put a keyframe there. Probably want the brightness to be, we'll go back to a 1. And our density scale, it will be kind of less dense, so we'll say 92. So over time our color on this object should change. Just for some graded animation, we'll push that down to here. So our smoke color kind of changes, but our density, I don't know, we'll keep the density around 8 here. And that's around maybe 60. And that should be good for the smoke color. So right here you can start to see our smoke beginning to change. So if we skim all the way down to 96, we should see some difference. So let's go all the way to 120 when there is no smoke around here, and just make the density scale something really low, like 0.1. $92, $99, and then it's almost completely kaput. Hi, so sorry for fast forwarding everybody, but I wanted to show you another way you could approach fracturing our ice crystal. So basically what I did here, which is I cashed out the entire ice and I broke it all into bits in one huge giant bit, and you can use that. And we'll show you how these will both fracture dynamically together later on. But I also by myself went forward and tried out another way of doing it, and I'll break that down for you right now. So over here I have my attribute paint, and if you don't know if you're in Houdini 17, attribute paint is just your regular paint stop. If you're in Houdini 18, it's now called attribute paint. And I've painted some color values onto my ice crystal. Let me just break this down for you because it's a little bit more complicated to understand. So if you want to switch to color, you have to change this attribute name from mask to CD and go back to your brush, and that will switch you over to your plain old color values. So down here I've deleted the selective color values that I want to work with. So I've just chosen that CD over 2.0, and delete non-selected. So this one's selecting the black, and then this one's selecting the white. Over here, I've just blasted away the top bits because I don't really need that. I polyfilled it, normalized it, created an out non-fracture. We might use this later just to visualize how our simulation is operating and merging everything together, but we'll see what happens. And then I've added a convex decomposition. And what this does is just break down your model into a more workable piece of geometry for collisions, and it's pretty handy. And then I've just added a null saying out collider. So when the pieces we want to fracture, they will collide with this object and fall down. And then this will be our static object in the scene, and over here will be our non-static pieces. So for the delete up here, that were the upper pieces of our ice, I took our RBD material fracture and I cached it out. I didn't really change any settings other than, I just put this on concrete, let it do its thing. I didn't change anything. I cached it out because I didn't want to waste more sim time than I am going to be doing. And in the exploded view, it kind of looks something like this. Switching a geometry like this over to glass doesn't really work well, so I just kept it on concrete. It seemed to work pretty reasonably. I'm going to create a DOPNet. And I'm going to put this here. Switch this over to pieces here. So here we are back. Clearly our DOPNet is here too. Everything looks pretty good, minus our caches. The reason being we actually have to save over our old file. Otherwise, if we just stay inside our crash folder, our temp folder, nothing is going to link correctly and we're going to have to recache everything. So that's probably not the best thing we want to do. So let me just resave and I'll be right back. So here we are back. Our caches are all work, so that's great. So we want to go inside our DOPNet. And then we want to jump out, and here's a little trick you can do. You can jump out and you can go RBD. Let's go RBD fractured object. So we can go RBD fractured objects. Going back into here, and we'll notice everything is not in our DOPNet. Why? Because we probably didn't select our file. Fracture object, fractured objects. Select the object and press enter. Suddenly, we have our DOP import and everything should be inside our DOPNet. DOP2. Just double checking why it says DOP2, but overall I think that seems to work. So, I'm also going to go back in here, go out, select my collider. You should probably cache out your convex decomposition. Well, we should anyway, so you know what, let's do that before we add anything else to our DOPNet. So that was saved out pretty quickly. So let's go to our DOPNet, dive right back in there. Attempted operation failed, I'm going to save. Okay, go back in, go back out, collisions, static objects, select our fire, and enter. Suddenly we have a static object from that, and it should work. So we'll go inside here and we'll press L. Inside here we have fire 1 and fire 2. This one says static object, and I'm just going to rename it. Let's say fire convex so we don't get too confused. So go here and we'll click on this. This one says displayed as geometry, but I don't currently see any. There we go. So I'm just going to make sure my collisions are working. Always make sure they're working. And then I'm going to just turn off my fire for a sec, just so we can see what's going on. I think that looks pretty solid. I might just see what putting this at 7 does. Probably makes it less detail. Okay. So put this at a 1.8. That's pretty good. And we'll turn this, always turn this off after you're done with it, because it will always slow down your simulation no matter what. So turn it off. We'll keep on our collisions just for now. And I'm going to put down a gravity. Simply because I want the pieces to fall before anything else, and we can just animate that later. I'm going to save again. And I'm going to turn this on. So let's see what happens. So here we go. This is what our current simulation kind of looks like with just a gravity turned on. It falls incredibly slowly. So you could probably do more with it. You could probably amp up the sub steps as well. We do have some interesting things happening. So we'll see where it starts falling. It starts falling around pretty much after frame 1. So as you may notice, there's some changes to my timeline. I've extended my timeline to 130 just to give it that extra few frames of wiggle room. What I've done on my rigid body solver, I've increased the time to scale to 1.5. And I've also jumped out here and made my start frame 100 where we want our ice to collapse. And it's going to save us a lot of sim time. So that was one of the reasons I did that. The only thing I changed about the collision object is I changed the physical to reducing the friction to 0, the dynamic friction scale to that, adding some temperature and not really touching much else. And then for this one, the physical, I changed dynamic friction scale, turned the friction to 0, the bounce is now 1, rotational stiffness is now 0 as well. And then for our gravity, I just made this -21. So now, I think what we can do is add our ground plane, because right now where you can see this collapsing is that it's not, as soon as it gets to the ground, it just keeps on going down. I think what I'm also going to do to our gravity is maybe add like 5. Give it some variation. So I'll let you see what happens before we add our ground plane. So I think I'm going to jump out here, add a ground plane, because why the hell not? Then it's of course giving me an error. So we'll go back down here, see what's happening. So we'll press L, go G on the keyboard, to our camera. You can see our ground plane's down there, but it's quite small. So we'll see what happens if we don't edit the ground plane. I think it could go a little bit faster, don't you? So we'll put that at a 2. Go back here, and before anything else happens, I'm going to save. And we'll sim that out. So now we have our ice that collapses and shatters. Pretty cool. So what we can do is, now that we have that in our .NET, we go over here to our .io, which of course doesn't make our pieces very happy, because why doesn't it? Because our pieces end after frame 120, which means we're going to have to resim a bunch of things, so we'll be careful. I'm just going to go ahead and sim that, and I'll let you know when that's all ready to go. So you can see right here, I'm having to go back to the very beginning where I chose my emitter for my height fields, and just recaching everything as I go along. So it's going to take some time, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back after caching everything out. That was a little bit of a nightmare, but we got through it in the end. So I've decided not to mess around with this one. simply because a lot more simpler and a lot more harder and longer to sim out. But I will say this, if you use this half the simulation that we did earlier, you probably don't need to use a collision object that we created over here. You just need to add the gravity and our forces like we did inside our DOPNet, and everything should collapse and fall over naturally, or whatever way you would like to use it as. So what I'm going to do is, once again, file cache, sim this all out. Scheduler is right here. We can see this is already simming out pretty fast. Don't mind this one. I'm recaching this one over here, and I wanted to speed up the process. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to go to merge, put this down here. We'll go object merge, go bottom. I always change this into this object. We're going to grab the out non-fracture. And we'll wait till our simulation catches up. Well, while that is doing something, right now we can go to attribute delete. And you'll suddenly notice we have all these values. And we probably don't need most of them. The only one that I would say we probably need here is the name. We need the normal for sure. Velocity, yes. Position. Color, we don't really need. So we can see some nice fractures going on. But we can also see some offset happening in our pieces, which is because our simulation is taking place. Interesting. Well, let's render this and see what it looks like. If we can't see the crack, then we can't see the crack, and it's fine. If we can, we'll change some stuff. But I'm not going to worry too much about it. So, we'll go out. Fracture dynamic. And then you'll notice up here that you have our out system ice. And what our out system ice was, it was at frame 65. We'll just zoom out so we can see what happens. There was nothing, and then it starts growing. And then this is what our render node was grabbing. In this case, what we'll want to do is create another switch node, so at a certain point it switches over from this ice over to a dynamic simulation, and then it starts shattering. So we won't really notice that hairline crack. We'll just see the ice starting to shatter and hit the ground. So we might not even need to change that crack at all. So we'll add a switch. And we'll probably do another object merge. And we'll do OG ice, because that's pretty much what it is. Go into this object, and we're grabbing the out system ice. And then, where is it? Right there. So now we have it. And you can see it's defaulted on that. So what I think I'm going to do, the simulation turns on at pretty much the forces start affecting it at frame 101. So before frame 101, we're going to have it completely switched over to our original ice. So what do? We do our good old frame So before that, ice, whole ice. Cool, right? Don't really need to worry about anything. So we'll go out, complete. And that would be pretty much it. So let's render it, see how it appears, and we'll render this frame, and we'll also render 130 just so you can see what's going on. So if you go to render ice, it's grabbing the fire system ice, and we'll switch that over to complete simulation. And I'm going to save before anything happens because I do find rendering puts strain on your computer and your computer can freak out. That's probably not a good idea. So we'll go to render ice and we'll see what happens. Wow, that's a lot of dispersion. I'm going to go to my camera, my render settings way for ice. I think this is upside down. I'm going to override the camera resolution because I do find that improves things quite a bit. So we'll let that render out and then we'll come right back once we get to this frame, and then I'll show you the snapshots in between this frame and also the shattered ice on the ground, just so you can see some comparisons, and we can conclude the tutorial. Alright, so here we go. Here is what our fractured ice looks like. So I'm going to stop the render. It's taking a little bit too long, but that's what the end kind of crumple looks like. If we go back here, we can see that from that size it goes to that. So yeah, it just kind of fractures. So I'm going to go back to frame 1. Actually, our ice starts around frame 75. So we'll play it from there, just so you can see what happens. And there we go. We've got some really good ice fracturing going on. You can probably move the simulation forward a bit. I would do that. I'd even go as far as to cache out my simulation a little bit more too in my final rendering process. So that speeds everything up. And then all you need to do is add the fire to it on the separate render layers like we showed earlier in part 1, and you're pretty much good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. My name is Kate, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!